For this video, I want to go over my experiences with some popular fish in the hobby that people commonly think will school around in their tank as a group. I'm going to be looking at Neon Tetras, Cardinal Tetras, Chili Rasboras, Harlequin Rasboras and Corydoras Aeneus. I will be using the terms schooling and shoaling interchangeably for this video, even though they are technically different. Before I actually take a look at each of the specific species in the video, I also want to touch on 3 different things that I've noticed can cause some of my fish to shoal up or bunch up and swim around together. The first one is a water change. As you can see in this clip, the telltale signs of the air bubble on the glass panel show that this tank has literally just had a water change. Sizable water changes in a tank can slightly tweak the water temperature, pH, TDS, chlorine levels and a few other variables in a very short period of time. This can cause some fish to bunch up and shoal around together until they calm down over the following hour or 2. Next up is a lighting change, and this only usually affects my Cardinal Tetras, but as you can see, when the night lights on my tanks kick in, my Cardinal Tetras usually start to shoal up and swim around together. The lights on this tank are automated and they even have a gradual night to day change, but my Cardinals do this around half the time when the blue light kicks in, and then they do start to calm down after around 30 minutes. My Corydoras often become hyperactive when the blue light kicks in for some reason, given the impression of shoaling, but I honestly think they're either playing around with each other or hunting detritus worms or something, as they are really random with their behaviours. The final thing I've noticed that can cause a shoaling or grouping behaviour is breeding behaviour from tank mates, like my 2 pearl gourami in this tank. As you can see in this clip, the male is guarding the bubble nest in the top right of the tank, while the female does her best to keep the other fish as far away from the bubble nest as possible. Unfortunately, I think I am going to have to give my 2 pearl gourami to a friend, as the other fish in this tank seem to just be getting stressed as the pearl gourami keep on breeding, as they've had 3 bubble nests now and it's just not fair. So moving on to the featured species for the video, and I'm going to be starting with Neon Tetras. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Neon Tetras schooling or shoaling, but in my experience a lot of this is totally incorrect. Other than the 3 situations I covered earlier in the video, the only time I've seen my Neon Tetras consistently shoal up and swim together is when I first got them and added them to my old 29-gallon tank. The fish were in a new environment with new water parameters, and they did stick together for a couple of days, gradually building up their confidence, even though I did my best to drip acclimatise them to the new tank. Over the following week they did become more and more independent, and now they happily go off and do their own thing without any signs of fear. I've kept my Neon Tetras in 3 different setups now, and I only saw this kind of behaviour from them for the first tank, making me think it was more of a water parameter issue rather than the new environment of the tank. In my experience, the majority of the time my Neon Tetras are just bimbling around the tank looking for food and don't really seem to care about anything else. My Neon Tetras aren't currently breeding, and unfortunately I have no archived footage that I can use for this, but the females do seem to bunch up during the breeding season and stick with the dominant male, while the dominant male will chase the other males away, so that can kind of make it look like the shoaling. Random loud noises and me accidentally knocking the bench the tank sits on does seem to startle the fish, but rather than shoaling up when this happens, they just dart off in random directions and hide in the plant cover towards the back of the tank. So although a lot of people say Neon Tetras are schooling fish, in my opinion it is very rare, and I really wouldn't recommend these if you want a schooling or shoaling fish for your aquarium. Next up we have Cardinal Tetras, and I know these guys look similar to my Neons, but Cardinals have a red belly while Neons have a white belly. Other than the 3 factors I covered back at the start of the video, it's actually quite rare that I see my Cardinal Tetras shoaling up. They definitely seem far more confident in themselves when compared to my Neon Tetras that I keep in the same tank, so I can judge how the 2 species react to the same situation. As I mentioned earlier, accidentally knocking the bench that this tank sits on will cause my Neons to dart off in different directions, but my Cardinals really don't seem to care, and they basically think I'm there to give them food or something. They just don't react. My Cardinal Tetras didn't even shoal up much back when I first added them to the tank. If I remember correctly, they kind of bunched up for an hour or 2 and explored the tank a little bit, but then they decided they could find more food if they just spread out and did their own thing. These Cardinal Tetras are all still juveniles, so they haven't had any breeding sessions yet, so I'm not sure if they'll do something similar to Neons for that, but they are a pretty independent and confident fish. Due to this, again, I really wouldn't recommend Cardinal Tetras if you're looking for something that will consistently try and show some type of shoaling behaviour. Moving on to Harlequin Rasboras, and these guys seem to be far more sociable than either of my Tetra species. This is a clip from a couple of months back now when I initially added them to the tank, and as you can see they've shoaled up and they are swimming around the tank together quite tightly. Unlike my Neon Tetras that took the slow and steady shoaling approach when first added to their tank, these guys are far more confident and faster in their shoaling. My Harlequins tend to shoal up similar to this if I accidentally knock the bench their tank sits on, but I have seen them do this randomly multiple times each day. I have no idea what causes them to just randomly do this, as I work in the same room as this tank, so I look at the tank regularly and I'd guess I catch them shoaling around randomly at least once per day. I don't have any direct experience with rummy-nosed tetras, but I know that those will shoal up around the tank and swim together a lot. Harlequin Rasboras seem to have a more relaxed personality and shoaling mentality when compared to rummy-nosed tetras. This does have its advantages because you still get to see the shoaling behaviour from the fish, but they will chill out a lot and just relax in the tank and not stress their tank mates out constantly. Out of the fish I have direct experience with, I probably would recommend Harlequin Rasboras for anyone who wants to see shoaling behaviour from their fish, because like I said, they just randomly start to do it multiple times a day, and they're also large enough for you to easily see in the tank. Next up we have Chili Rasboras, and these guys are probably my tightest and most frequent shoaling fish by far. The problem is these guys are absolutely tiny and difficult to see, so I will be using some macro lens clips to zoom in on them for this video. A lot of the time when I look at this tank from say 2 meters or more away from the actual glass pane, you can't really see them and they just look like little red lines moving around. The fact that these fish are so small may be one of the reasons that they'll shoal up and group together so consistently in my aquariums. It does seem that different types of Rasbora tend to randomly shoal more than different types of Tetra, other than the rummy-nosed Tetra that I touched on earlier. My Chili Rasboras are currently in a tank with 2 honey gourami that are at least twice the size of them, but so far they are acting a lot calmer than they were in my 29-gallon tank that had far more fish in there with them. I also think that the deepness of their red colour hue comes into play, as they are far darker in this tank and they seem far calmer and relaxed too. A few months back they were in my 29-gallon tank and they would turn red randomly from time to time, but they were usually the dingy orange colour that people have problems with their Chili Rasboras. They also seem to shoal up a lot more frequently back when I had them in the 29-gallon tank with a lot more fish species, so I do think the dingier orange colour might be an indicator of stress, as is the shoaling behaviour. Just like my Harlequin Rasboras, I'll randomly look over at this tank multiple times a day and see them shoaling around, but you really do have to get close to see them due to their small size. This is the main reason that I'd recommend Harlequin Rasboras over Chili Rasboras if you want something that will actively shoal in your tank. Their small size just makes it too difficult to see them. Still, even with their deeper red colour, they do still seem to shoal up a decent amount of the time and swim together as a group. Finally, we have Corydoras, and I only have direct experience with Corydoras Aeneus, and I know that different types of Corydoras can have very different behaviours to each other. I currently have 5 Corydoras in my tank, and I know a lot of people often recommend you keep a minimum of 6, so this may be affecting their behaviours, but I honestly don't think it will be. From what I've seen, Corydoras Aeneus specifically are very, very confident fish. They really don't seem to care about what is going on in their tank mates, and they really only have 2 modes. Their first mode is foraging around in their aquarium for food, and their second mode is them relaxing on the substrate after a big meal. I work from home directly to the right of this tank, so if I'm working and I glance to my left, especially near meal times, I usually see my Corys doing this. It's as if they've worked out that they can group up and guilt trip me into feeding them earlier. I would definitely class Corydoras as a social fish because I see them resting on the substrate together on a regular basis almost daily. It is definitely more common that I see the skinnier 3 Corydoras doing this, as the other 2 are very greedy and they will eat the food in the tank far longer than the other 3 Corydoras. My original 4 Corys did shoal around the original tank I put them in for a little while, but it really didn't seem that long, maybe a day or 2 at most, but now they really don't act like this, they just kind of do their own thing. One of those original 4 Corys did unfortunately die within a month or 2 of actually getting it, so I did keep 3 of them back in that tank in my old 29-gallon scape, and their behaviour was pretty much identical to the 5 I have right now. That's why I really don't think you need a minimum of 6 Corydoras Aeneus. So one thing I do think is cool about the Corys is that they seem to know as soon as food hits their water column, they may be able to smell it or something like that, but their foraging behaviour seems to kick in straight away as soon as they know it's mealtime. This can look as if they are shoaling around together, but I think it's just all of the fish picking up the scent or the taste of the food somehow and heading in the same direction to feed. It's not really shoaling. Due to this, I would class my Corys as more of a social fish that are pseudo-shoalers, but they are really interesting to watch, and they are more like little tiny aqua puppies that stare at you to beg for food than actual fish. So if you do want something that kinda looks like it's shoaling but has also got other interesting behaviours and are very easy to keep, Corydoras Aeneus are great, and there's a couple of colour variations out there of them as well. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope I've been able to share a more realistic expectation of the real behaviour when it comes to schooling or shoaling of these fish. Thanks for watching and have a good day.